Hello everyone and welcome to the Giant Brain Lecture Theatre. I'm Iain McAllister and I'll be your interviewer tonight. My guest tonight will be familiar to those of you listening who play tabletop RPGs. He's had his artwork appear in numerous titles, including the revival of the Dragon Warriors RPG and the Lord of the Rings RPG when it was produced by Cubicle 7. He's had experience as an art director, deputy CEO, and creative director, but now his journey has taken him on a different path. He's built up his own company, Handiwork Games, over the last few years, with projects like Beowulf, the recently revived A-State, and a series of card games made with his kids. It's my great pleasure to welcome Jon Hodgson to the Giant Brain HQ. How are you doing, Jon?
I am good. Yeah, it's lovely to be here. Thank you very much for asking me. It sounds good, doesn't it, all that? It is funny. I know to think about it, there's always something in front of me that we're working on or is on fire. But yeah, I look at all that.
Yeah, you got to summarise somehow. I mean, the first question obviously is, how's the dog? Because I saw you posting pictures of the long dog today.
Yeah, nice.
Love greyhounds. My first dog was a greyhound.
Oh, he's lovely. Yeah, we got him about a year ago. Finn, he's called, and he's really coming out of his shell, but it has taken him a year.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Rescue, was he? Or
yeah, rehomed greyhound. So X-ray.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some argument about whether they're rescued or not. I think they are, but
yeah. Whatever you want to call them, but yeah, ours was that as well. Yeah,
no, it's nice. No, he's good. He's great. He's good for the whole family, and he sleeps a little bit in the office, which is nice. Keeps me company.
Excellent. Cool. So you've spent a large part of your life in creative roles in the RPG industry. How did you get started on that path?
So, I mean, the sort of joke answer, but absolutely true, is I was too lazy to do comics. I really wanted to be in comics, and I made a lot of comics and sold a lot of indie comics. I did all right selling comics. But when you look at the sort of career path ahead of you on that, if you want to get into the sort of bigger titles and work on a monthly, it's like 24 pages a month. And you start to think, and you sort of got to be able to do a page a day. And then you realize it's just a page a day every day. And I just thought, it wasn't so much laziness, but I just thought, gosh, I don't really want to do that. I don't think that's, I trained as a painter. I got a fine art degree for my sins in like abstract painting, which, was good to have learned a lot of stuff through that. I think.
Where did you get that degree?
Nottingham.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Nottingham Trent. It was good. Yeah, it was good. I made some really good friends there and I learned an awful lot. A lot of it was self-directed, which was really important. I mean, it was kind of a bit of a lackluster course in that we had a tutorial once every 5 weeks, and then it was just contactless time, really. There's very little. So you either did it yourself or you didn't do anything, so that was cool. You had to grow up a little bit, I think, on that. And to sort of resolve that you actually wanted to make paintings or whatever, your specialization was. But yeah, no, I did painting. I was really into comics and always into sort of fantasy art and all that. So I started out as a freelance illustrator, which I did for many years, probably about 10 years. I was working on like L5R card game, Warcry, Warhammer Historical for a really long time. I worked there, did all books,
okay.
Which was great, brilliant experience. I mean, they would hand me a whole book, pay me half up front, which was amazing because it was quite a lot of money,
That is good for that period, yeah.
Yeah, it was, but it was 40 illustrations or something a book, and I was just sort of art directing myself pretty much. The guy running, Rob Broom, who's a lovely guy, brilliant bloke, still in touch with him. He would sort of give me some pointers, but we pretty much had a sort of format down pat, and I would just go off and do it and head into Nottingham with my DDR or whatever it was with the artwork on by hand, which was nice. Lots of good stories from those times. Prior to that, I worked a bit in film and TV. I used to draw Bob the Builder.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was like a proper commercial artist. I used to do props making. I've done all sorts of nonsense. But and I didn't really like that either. A lot of it's going to be I didn't really like these things. So I ended up, eventually I found my way into role-playing games and liked it and stayed there. Kind of card games as well. Card games, role-playing games, board games, all of that stuff. And fantasy art, which I've always loved. I mean, if you're familiar with my work, I like sort of green and brown, gnarly stones, people in fur clothes, it's what I've always loved.
The three staples of fantasy art: green, brown, and fur clothes.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the sort of first What was the first RPG you worked on?
There was a game called, the first RPG would have been Dark Continent by New Breed Games, which was Dave Salisbury, who now runs Fanboy 3 in Manchester. Lovely bloke.
All right, yeah.
Dave, if you hear this. And they gave me my first kind of break in RPGs. And at the same time, I was working for AEG on the Warlord card game. I don't remember that. It was like a sort of D20.
Yeah, I remember it well. Yeah.
Fighting game. Yeah, I did loads. I mean, I ended up doing about 300 cards on that. I did loads on that.
I never connected your art with that game, actually. I have played a bit of the Warlord RPG, CCG, and now thinking back, I can totally see it.
I remember some of the famous that I did, but I can't remember anything about it. Years and years ago. In fact, while I was at that point in my career, I was also working in a comic and game shop. I worked for Travelling Man in Leeds. And that was brilliant because there were a couple of guys who were like full-time illustrators and artists who used to come in there and get their comics, and I used to get to talk to them. So it was Kev Walker, obviously, who's like an absolute legend. I am still completely starstruck when I meet Kev. I'm not starstruck by many people, but Kev terrifies me, which is stupid because he's lovely and really nice and would be totally Wayne Reynolds used to come in and get his comics. Again, lovely guy. Speak to Wayne quite a bit. He's great. Ralph Horsley, also lovely guy. We helped him make his art book this last year. Brilliant guy. One of my best friends actually is Ralph. But it was brilliant to be able to speak to them and see people who are actually making a living doing what I wanted to do, which is so important, that you can go, well, if they can do it, maybe I can make half my living. If I'm half as good as them at it, maybe I can, cut down my day job a little bit at a time or something like that. But it's good. But there was the working on Dave Salisbury's Dark Continent, and then AEG, and then SLA Industries was the next thing I did.
Oh, okay,
contract directory for them. So like everybody's ever worked in the role playing games community in the UK, basically, so I've worked on SLA. So that's the sort of start of the Scottish connection, really. Yeah.
When did it sort of become a full time job for you? When did you sort of like completely switch to doing art for RPGs?
I think it was about 2001, I think. 2001, I went fully full-time. And it was really, I was working at Travelling Man 4 days a week. And I sort of said to myself, if I could earn, it doesn't matter now, it's so long ago, I was earning £500 a month at Travelling Man, which I could live on, which is sort of a bit weird now, isn't it? When you
not on today's money, but yeah.
Yeah, today's money you can't. So I was paying my rent and everything at the comic shop. And I thought, if I can earn reliably that same amount of money while working at the comic shop, and then I can quit the comic shop, and that'd be fine. I sort of always used to average out what I earned across 3 months, and I was always ready to like quit if I didn't earn enough money. It was very important to me that it paid the rent, and if it didn't, it was sort of pointless and stupid. It was a bit harsh when I look back, but that seemed very important. Sort of samurai ethic that either I made the money or I quit.
Maybe it's fair.
Maybe it helped. Probably did. Took it very seriously. I mean, obviously I still take it very seriously now, but, in a sort of slightly more relaxed way. It was good though. I mean, great times working on stuff there. It was very enjoyable actually. Being a full-time illustrator was great. It was a really good job. It did get a bit weird where you can start to lose the connection between doing work. You'll have like a really, really busy month where you work all the hours and then nobody pays you anything. And
I can imagine.
It gets a bit weird. You're like, but what does any of this mean almost, So, I was then offered a full-time position I'd started doing quite a lot of freelancing for Cubicle 7. And I was offered an art direction role there. I think that was 1 day a week, first of all, if I remember right.
Wow.
I mean, again, we're talking sort of quite ancient history now. And I just gradually worked my way up through that company. I was still freelancing. I mean, I was freelancing on D&D and all that. I forget this stuff. There was 2 years where I worked on 12 books for D&D. And I just forget these things. Yeah, no, I was doing quite a lot on actual D&D, which you forget. But at the same time, I was working on like Ron Edwards' Spione. And
oh wow, there's a blast from the past.
I know, right? I must think that out. I want to read it. And Matt Snyder's Dust Devils. I had top indie credibility, let me tell you. But while also working on D&D, which sort of amused me greatly. The sort of losing the connection between getting paid and the work you were doing, and then starting a family kind of pushed me towards a full-time position at Cubicle 7. So I became art director there, and then worked my way up there to eventually become deputy CEO for a few years and creative director. So I was overseeing all the sort of creative endeavors there for a few years, 3 or 4 years, I think that was.
Let's get into a little bit about your time at Cubicle 7, because like you just said, you've been art director there, you've been deputy CEO and creative director. What was that journey like, moving into sort of like full-time work for a bigger company, having been freelance? What those kind of roles entail, and what is it like working on like big franchises like Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who that Cubicle 7 own right now? Well, sorry, Cubicle 7 no longer own Lord of the Rings, I guess, because Free League now have it, but they did. Anyway.
Yeah, they did at the time. It was quite daunting because, I'd spent a lot of time not really having a proper job, and prior to that, only really working in either sort of creative stuff or then in a sort of part-time retail environment, which I really didn't feel like was me. I was looking to get, obviously you've got to pay the rent however you can.
Yeah.
So it was quite challenging because I suddenly had to do things like spreadsheets and, that we'd never used and worked it out pretty quick. But I mean, I sort of learned what I needed to learn about a week, really, and I still use the same pathetic level of spreadsheet knowledge now. I know how to do what I need to do, But that was really good, actually. I was given a lot of creative freedom. It was a really good partnership for a long time working. I was definitely fast friends with Dom, who owns Cubicle 7. Angus was still there when I first joined.
Sure.
Obviously, Angus moved on. The timeline's a bit confused. I could sit and work it out, but it's not particularly interesting. So Angus had founded the company, and then Dom came in as a partner, and then I came in as a full-time employee. Angus moved to some other things, and then I sort of started to move up. Then, that got me in full-time, and then, creative directorship. I mean, that was pretty daunting because I was sort of commissioning all the creative work and overseeing all the lines. And there were fairly regular shifts around towards the end of my time there. We didn't have any line developers anymore. There was a change in the model, and I was managing directly all the line, which was absolutely exhausting, to be honest. I mean, work for any one person. But working on those big ones. I mean, I nearly didn't do the One Ring gig. I took on the illustration work initially on the One Ring before I was working for them full time, and that was very daunting. And I nearly turned it down because I absolutely love Tolkien and always have. And, if you have to sort of commit to that and put your mark on it, I mean, people are very passionate. I'm very passionate about it, and it's fairly terrifying. But then you think, well, look, what are you doing this for? If that sort of job comes along and you turn it down because you're frightened, well, you just quit.
Yeah.
What's the Songs for Drella line? You're going to play the museums like some dilettante is, it's exactly that moment. And we go, well, step on up. And that was amazing because I had a real meeting of minds with Francesco Nepatello, again, who I'm still very good friends with Francesco.
Yeah, so he's the designer of the
yes,
Lord of the Rings RPG, or what was at the time, yeah.
Yeah, him and Marco Maggi, who Marco tends to be more in the background because his English is not quite as good as Francesco's, but that's a shame, actually, because Marco's a really lovely guy. But I've really got on with Francesco. He'd seen my work on the Dragon Warriors RPG, which sort of helped me get that gig, because that thing that I do, whatever it is, the sort of, gnarly stones and, loose brushwork is what they were looking for. That style really developed through the One Ring, and it was all very much based in history, the sort of stuff coming from Warhammer Historical, having done like the Age of Arthur book and Shield Wall and all that. I knew quite a lot about the early medieval period, which, one of Tolkien's big influences, and certainly not his only influence, but it really helps visually to tie all of that, I think, to some historical models, and have the sort of what would be the word, the sort of visual vocabulary to mix it up a bit, so you're not slavishly doing, the people from Gondor are these people and the people from Rohan are these people. You can sort of mix a few languages, visual languages, if you like, which I was able to do, which, it was nice to get to flex all that. Always really daunting, really upsetting when, like, the first big painting I did was Rivendell. And again, I'll talk about the deep end. I just go and paint Rivendell. I'll crack on with
it. Just do that, obviously.
Yeah, just do it. And I mean, I've got another good story about that, because I worked with John Howe as well. There was one time, the cover to Tales from Wilderland, the first supplement for the one.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Jon didn't have time to paint it. He'd sketched the cover, but he just didn't have time because obviously he has other huge commitments. I think the Hobbit movies, I mean, if I remember rightly, were taking up his time. And he had said, I mean, gosh, what a thing. He had said, well, why don't you get that guy to do it? Look, he could take my pencil sketch. So I find myself like sitting at my monitor looking at this Jon Howe pencil sketch, and you actually have a moment where you've got to like put paint on it. I really made myself laugh. It's on nervous, terrified laughter. Because what a moment, you know, you're just going to mess this thing up. I mean, thank God for digital, so you can redo it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, this is amazing. And the whole thing felt like that, really. And it felt like getting away with something because we decided to not cleave to the movies at all, and we wanted it to look different to the movies. It was a different license to the license the movies operate on, so you have to be very careful to steer clear of all that stuff. I hate it to this day. It makes me twitch when I see stuff that is in the Wandering role-playing game that is clearly from the movies. It shouldn't be there, I don't think. You know, in just my opinionated opinion, you know, people can do what they want. You know, it's their gig now.
Sure.
It makes me cringe. So, yeah, no, and we got away with it. People liked it, which was sort of miraculous. But, you know, what can you do? But, yeah, very daunting and very sort of humbling kind of experience in a very genuine way, actually. But, yeah, it was good.
Did you have much involvement with the Doctor Who RPG as well? Or after your time?
Yeah, no, I was creative director through that. So I was art director when they'd released the much delayed, like, second edition with Matt Smith on the box. I was kind of full time around that, and then I oversaw sort of the limited edition, anniversary edition. What else did we? All sorts. I mean, we did loads and loads of books. All the Doctor's source books, all of that jazz was on my watch. Had a lot of good fun working with Andrew Kenrick, who was had previously been the editor of White Dwarf, and we hired him as the head of editorial. Yeah. Did Dead of Night RPGs. Andrew, Dead of Night, colder. No, he's Dead of Night. Isn't it?
Yeah, he's Dead of Night. Yeah, I used to chum around with him in the Collective Endeavour many moons ago.
Yeah, I mean, that was good stuff. When the Collective Endeavour, that comes up a lot even now. I mean, how to work on an RPG booth is laid down by the Collective Endeavour, and that's required reading, I think.
Yeah,
we'll get on to all that because that brings Malcolm into the story, doesn't it? But
yeah, absolutely.
Worked with Doctor Who. Doctor Who was great. Loads of meetings with BBC. All that was good. And we did the Doctor Who card game with Martin Wallace. That was another terrifying one where I had to art direct the Martin Wallace Doctor Who card game. And I only had one plan, you know. Sometimes you come up with several approaches and you can just sort of go, look, well, we could do this or we could do that. I only really had one idea that I really believed in, and I would have felt it was a total waste to go, I'll make up some nonsense to also present. And Martin, you know, he's a plain speaking fella, you know, he says what he likes. And quite right too. He's, you know, legendary designer. He's got every qualification to speak plainly. And this isn't euphemistic. He's not horrible. He's a lovely bloke, but he'll just tell you if it's rubbish.
Yeah. That's good.
Luckily he liked it. I was absolutely terrified. That was proper terrifying, actually. Doing that, so he liked the design for all of that stuff. So yeah, that was nice. And we really stripped those cards, are really stripped back, and we did 2 editions of that card game. The second one was sort of my ideal, really. Everything was pared right back. Frames, you know, there's going to be none of those Magic the Gathering style frames on cards. It's been a while since I've done any card game art direction, but that sort of stuff used to really make me crazy, that card games apparently have to look like Magic the Gathering in some quarters. You know, it's like, oh, well, there'll be artwork at the top and they'll have a little computer-generated box around it. You know, but we got rid of all that, which was lovely. Really cool.
So you've kind of moved on from that now. You've established Handiwork Games over the last few years. You've moved into being an independent publisher. So what made you want to pursue that life?
So I think, I mean, the sort of short version, which people like Chris Paramus from Green Ronin will tell you, it's kind of the curse of Warhammer, really. Warhammer 4th edition was a very unpleasant project to work on. It was incredibly stressful. The clock had been run down really far on that project. And everyone just fell out. I mean, it's as simple as that. It was very disappointing the way it went down. Friendships were busted up by that. There were some nasty actors involved in all that as well, who kind of wanted my job and got it, you know. But it was time to go, really. It was over. It was, you know, these things sometimes come to an end, don't they? And the time was right. Very quickly, I realized I should have moved on a lot sooner. You end up in a position where really you should just go and do your own thing. I was paid to have a lot of ideas. I was paid to be sort of number two in the company and made a lot of calls when it was necessary for me to make them in support of the boss and so on. But I think there comes a time where you're almost too big for the role, not too big as in too clever or whatever, but just, you're used to making a lot of calls, and it gets to a point where you should just go and do your own thing, which is, if you've got all these ideas, go and do them. Was what I said to myself. Nobody said that to me, but that's, what I did. And I thought, well, it's a bit of an experiment. We don't have an About Us page, which I want to put right this week. There were some sensitivities when we moved on because quite a lot of the team came with me, and I didn't want that to be upsetting to anyone. On our About Us page, you'll read eventually if I ever get up. It's a bit of an experiment, really. I wanted to run an organization that was really sort of flat management structure. Everybody that works there for any length of time has a little stake in the company. Eventually, don't tell my business partner, but I would like to eventually move it to a complete co-op, which I think we'll do. I mean, there's some money to be repaid. I managed to win some investment, when I was setting up.
Yeah.
It needs to, we need to finish off repaying all that kind of thing, so that the person who gave us a huge opportunity is rewarded for his massive kindness and massive punt that he took on us. But once that's all, I think it's the way forward. Really, is much more forward-looking kind of co-op model. We do stuff like we work 4 days a week. At the moment, I'm not working 4 days a week. We've got so much on, but starting in January, we just thought, well, let's trial this 4 day a week thing and see how we go. And it's been brilliant. It's been really, really good. Everyone gets
I managed to get 4 days a week middle of last year at my job, and it's been the best thing I've ever done.
Good, isn't it? You get a lot more done in 4 days because you're just not pacing. I mean, it's absolutely obvious, you're not pacing yourself for 5 days, and you've got to get stuff done in 4, and you do.
Yeah.
It's good. I like it. It's really nice. Right. It's nice to be able to just sort of make those decisions. I mean, like the name Handiwork Games was, I really wanted to run something where, like, the people that you speak to when you interact with a company, well, mostly it's me. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and it's not so much about me, but the people who make the games are the people you speak to. And it's very one-to-one. It's very sort of, I suppose, like artisan stuff. We're a sort of atelier workshop where the people who are representing the company and the games are the people who made them. And I think there's something sort of, I mean, maybe it's all a bit naive, but it seems to be working. It's all right, And I mean, interestingly, the other day I was asked, why do you, is there a reason you don't have any licensed products? And I've been in various talks about licenses and so on, but that kind of stuff and a big head count, and it's all big. Do you know what I mean? It requires a lot of fuel to keep that engine running. You pay big advances to things, and it's really stressful. I kind of, I serve my time in that. I've done them.
Yeah, sure.
Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who, Warhammer. I think there's not really anywhere to go further higher up the ladder that I'm interested in. So it's been.
You wouldn't want to work on the Marvel Universe role-playing game, then?
No, I would not, Ian. No. But it's really interesting to move out from under. Like, sure. I'm trying to think if there were any licensors. I can't say there's been any licensors we worked for who were sort of horrible. The BBC were lovely. Sophisticated Games, Robert Hyde, who owns the One Ring and all that jazz. He's lovely guy, really nice. I mean, I get on with him so much better since I left. And all that sort of pressure that comes with it can be really, I think if you're a really creative person, you don't necessarily want all that. It's all right. It's nice for a while. I like it would be foolish to claim I didn't enjoy the medals and the sure. adoration that comes with it. But you get to a point where you've done it. I don't care, what people think, really. Weird. It's a very weird position to be in. It's all right. We just do what we want.
Yeah. So one of the early projects you did was Beowulf, which uses the current edition of Dungeons and Dragons. Can you tell us a little bit about that project and how you approached adapting the 5th edition rule set?
Yeah, because it's quite a strong adaptation. It's for one player and one GM. And this came about because we sort of gathered a little team right at the beginning and thought, well, what do we want to make? You can make anything. What do we want to do? And what do we know about? And of course, there's a sort of history angle. There's the sort of early medieval stuff. There was a load of stuff I wanted to do sort of inspired by Tolkien's influences, one of which is Beowulf, obviously very strongly, that you can't really do in the licensed game, because it's not, we were never limited to particular geographic areas, but the game limits itself to quite a narrow focus. Like one thing, I never got to paint any sort of ships or seascape or anything like that, and that was almost, you could cite that as an influence on Beowulf, that I'd get to draw a load of ships. And I'm not some sort of mad ship fan. It's just a bit different, but it's drawing from similar sources that Tolkien was drawing from. And through chats, it was myself, Jacob Rogers, who's really brilliant 5e designer, works with us, David Rea, who's also really good. David's got this really sharp mind, actually. I enjoyed working with David. And sort of slowly through conversation, this idea kind of emerged. It was one that was sort of whittled out of the stuff we had to hand. It was definitely workshopped. It didn't spring out in an instant. It was a case of pulling together different things we wanted to achieve and wanted to do. And the combination of Beowulf being this sort of lone hero and being public domain, is helpful. So people would recognize it, but it wouldn't come with the burdens of a license. And one player, one GM just seemed really like that's a really cool thing to do. Nobody was doing it in the 5e space that we were aware of. I think there's a whole bunch of blogs, natural play, where people are doing duet play, but I don't think there's many 5e sort of duet play products that I'm aware of, at least. It'd be cool to check them out if people know of them. But Beowulf's it's really cool, actually. A really fantastic product to work on. It's really nice and really let us sort of flex our muscles in terms of sort of product quality and all that jazz. Because it had to be really good, didn't it? It's the first thing we did. Had to be all singing, all dancing. We had to lay out the stall. There was no second chances to make a first impression and all that sort of cliche. But, absolutely true. And I was very happy with it in the end. We did some fun stuff. Yeah, like doing the subclasses there's the hero class. There's only one class that you play in Beowulf, which I like. It's on naughty that there's only one class because people are, we've got 27,000 classes in our game. We've got one. And there's 6 subclasses that are all related to an ability score in D&D. So, it's real old school. You've got your strength heroes and your dexterity heroes. So that all works really well. And it's cool. Good stuff.
Wizards of the Coast has recently announced the future of Dungeons and Dragons, doing away with additions and effectively just tweaking the current 5th edition rule set as the franchise moves forward. How do you feel about that change? And do you think it'll affect how companies like Handiwork produce 5th edition adjacent projects in the future?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It doesn't alarm me at all. I mean, it's always a little bit of a worry when there's talk of a new edition coming. And I always try and sort of keep myself calm. Because actually, if there were to be a sudden turnaround on that and 6th edition came out and it was all different and there was no OGL support and so on, if we couldn't be compatible with the new one, for a little bit you go, oh no, Beowulf's like this evergreen product for us. We still sell a lot of Beowulf on a sort of weekly basis. Would that all go away? But then you look at it and go, yeah, but to be practical, we're going to have to reprint it quite soon. So if it all went away and we had to come up with something else, that wouldn't be the end of the world. That would be okay. And I'm quite practical in that way. I'll have a few moments where you go, oh no, this is bad. But then you think, well, no, it's just all opportunities, isn't it? Different paths to take. I think it's good. I think they're on to something with 5th edition. I know it's sort of a hot topic for people. People really like to say bad things about D&D and 5th edition. I personally really like it. I think it's probably my favourite. I'm a big fan of like Redbox D&D. I like my D&D. I was about to say old school. That's not right. That means something else these days. I just like simple sort of D&D. And 5e scratches a lot of those itches. I really like a lot of stuff that's in there. Inspiration is great. I really like conditions, I think, are great. There's some neat little rules packaged up there and it comes apart and you can put it back together in lots of different ways. So I like it. I'm a fan of 5e. But it doesn't, apparently, or if you read Twitter, that would sort of spit on indie games as I walked past them in my fur coat. Whereas obviously just made the most ridiculous lightweight storytelling game imaginable. I've always been a sort of pluralist, like we're talking about earlier,
I mean, a lot of people won't know that you live in a gigantic mansion from all your Beowulf.
Yeah, from all my D&D money. Yeah. All my GP. I've got I'm nth level now. Yeah.
So there's a weird sort of fight there, and obviously 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons has been hugely popular, especially over the last couple of years. people finding it during lockdown, Critical Role bringing a lot of attention to Dungeons and Dragons. It's brought it to a wider audience than ever before. How do you think that popularity is affecting smaller role-playing game companies like yourself?
Brilliant for them. And if they say otherwise, they're idiots. I just said that to be bad. No, I think it's really good. I do believe it is an all ships rise thing. I know there's this line of discourse that says it's crowding out other systems. You want to have tried to be a publisher before 5th edition, before Drive-Through RPG, before DM's Guild. DM's Guild, I get it. If you don't like 5e, right, I get it. I was saying on Twitter today, there are certain modes of thinking that come with being a D&D player or starting as a D&D player or sticking as a D&D player that I think harmful is too strong a word, but your thinking can become a little bit rigid, I think, and board games can be so much more. I totally see that. I'm in this hideous classical liberal position of taking this middle ground position. I don't take that position in much else, to be honest. But I do think it's good for small companies. I think the larger audience for role-playing games in general does help everybody, because a lot of people will become dissatisfied with D&D. If it is correct that D&D is not a satisfactory product and does not do enough to represent the entirety of the art of role-playing games, good. People will leave and find other things. And I think they are doing that. I think we're seeing increased sales in everything. I think the indie RPG scene has a problem that it's absolutely flooded because it's so easy now. And I know people will be upset if I say something's easy because it's still hard work. But in comparison to print on demand, is incredible now. Yeah. Things you can get, everyone's printing their zines at Mixam. You didn't used to be able to do that. You just couldn't do it. It didn't exist.
And you don't even need to print it at all. You can just go straight to Drive-Through RPG and release things as PDFs. Yeah, the barrier to sort of production entry is lower than it's ever been.
I used to get in trouble jumping back to the collective endeavor, which I always thought was fantastic community of creators and really stellar people there, yourself included, Iain, actually, if I may say so. I forgot what I was going to say. That was good.
That's right. Just praise me a bit more and it'll be fine.
It's really good. Really interesting. I've remembered what I was going to say. I got in trouble there because I suggested the very naughty idea that you could measure success with money, right? So I can't make myself laugh, which does not popular in indie circles. But what I was trying to say is, I think you need to be honest about why you're doing something. So you can't, on one hand, say, I am only about the high art. I am about the sort of, I'm not bound by commercial concerns. I have much loftier goals, but I'm really angry that I can't get any sales. Well, you can't have it both ways. That doesn't make any sense at all. And then to go, and it's D&D's fault. I'm sorry, I'm a bit old for that now. I just don't think that's true. I think, there is, you can see success in a variety of venues for a lot of different types of games. I don't really think D&D's crowded out. I do think if you feel that the design space only exists on Twitter, you would be a bit fed up with Twitter people who like 5e. I think I am completely prepared to make that concession, because it can be quite annoying, can't they? Them people, but I don't think they're very representative of the entire 5e.
Yeah, I mean, you get this in the board game community as well. It's like people don't seem to realize that there's a whole conversation happening outside the platform of Twitter, and that not everyone is on Twitter 24 hours a day to talk about board games.
It could be quite unpleasant medium a lot of the time. I sort of dip my toe in, and I've had some nice times on Twitter, but sometimes you feel a bit like, wow, this is just set up for people are waiting to just take chunks out of each other. And I don't know, I'm not really.
There's an algorithm thing there as well, which rewards sort of the anger with clicks and views and that kind of thing. But that's a whole different conversation, I think.
Yeah, I think it feeds in, doesn't it? If I had to say, I think that would be really my answer to that whole question is that actually I think there's a bigger hobby than the public discourse we see. I think it's a lot nicer hobby, actually. People are all right, and it is a shame the algorithm can't reward kindness, but it'd be nice, wouldn't it? Imagine that. Imagine if it did. Wow.
She get on that social platform.
Mm-hmm.
Make that next.
Kindness clicks. I did come up with a thing I'll just say this because I don't think we'll put it into production now because it will look too much like what C7 did with their Doctors and Daleks adaptation. I might still do something with it. They've done a sort of social combat thing. I like the idea of reversing everything in D&D. Don't change anything, but reverse it so that hit points are people's resistance to being your friend, and all your sort of attacks on their hit points are like sort of friendly behavior, and you whittle them down, and then you overcome the encounter. It's like a gang of orcs, right? And I'm imagining this for no reason at all in a sort of American high school, and there's a sort of gang of orcs in the locker sort of corridor thing. I don't know what that's called. The hall, is it? And and you have to whittle them down so that you overcome the encounter. Instead of killing them, they're just your pals, and just move out of the way and let you get on with your day. And I thought that would be really nice. I think you could do some nice things. But all the mechanics should be exactly the same. But instead of wounding people, you sort of lift them up and inspire them to friendship.
I would play that. I would definitely play that. That sounds great.
I quite like, just as an idea, I like the sort of feeling it gives my brain when I think about being really, complimenting some orcs. And I don't forget to have orcs in it, but, compliment some bullies and then they might feel a bit better.
Yeah. Good idea.
We'll have to see, won't we?
So your most recent project was called Mask Witches of Forgotten Doggerland. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a good name. Now, this is a very different project to Beowulf because Mask Witches of Forgotten Doggerland just leapt whole cloth into my fevered imagination. I had started mucking around with the now very controversial, but not at the time, AI Midjourney. A friend of mine who is, I think he's like senior concept artist now. He's certainly, sort of super full-time, very experienced member of the Blizzard design team. A guy called Mike Francina, who I knew Mike when he was knee-high to a grasshopper and used to help him with his artwork. He's like doing the real job now. And he had been making these incredible images, these really weird, dreamlike, sort of really hard to explain. And you've got to remember, before we had seen the horror that is Midjourney now. And it was like, what is this? How, and I got talking to him, and I'd been working on a little storytelling game called The Silver Road. Very, very simple. This had grown out. I made a slightly embittered Harry Potter piss take kind of game, mirth take game.
Okay. Where
the main thing was that the rule of interest in this one-page Harry Potter RPG, or Magic Wizard School RPG, was that when you tried to do a thing as a hero, you rolled a dice, and it was all 6-sided dice. And if you rolled anything other than a 1, you succeeded at things you were good at, like they do in those books. But if you rolled a 1, you succeeded at it on your next go. And it was meant to sort of be funny because in those books, Harry fails to do something and everyone says encouraging things and then he does it. But I just kept thinking about this rule over and over, and there was like something in it. So cutting a long story short, because I'm really rambling, that became the Silver Road. That's the basis of the Silver Road, is that you have 2 things you're good at, which you will succeed at pretty much without fail. And even if you fail, you'll do it the next round. And you come up against obstacles. If you fail against an obstacle, it inflicts a consequence on you from a sort of pre-programmed list that it rotates through. And that my classic example is if it was a Lord of the Rings game, Boromir would be good at fighting. So Boromir fighting some orcs. So I like how I just use orcs all the time, really unpolitically correct sort of examples. Let's call them trolls. But Boromir's fighting some trolls. He will win every time, every round he rolls a dice, he will, and it's all narrated, he will overcome the orcs in whatever way trolls, in whatever way he chooses to narrate. His player narrates how he's overcome them, unless he rolls a 6. And if he rolls a 6, the consequence has a very strong chance of applying, the obstacle rather of the trolls has the very strong chance of applying the consequence. Someone is hurt. It doesn't have to be Boromir. It's just somebody in the scene gets hurt. So suddenly it's really dangerous to be friends with Boromir if you're not good at fighting, because, which sort of seems true to all that all happened. And that game did really nicely. I just put it out straight away. We didn't do anything. We didn't sort of crowdfund it, or, we just made the game and printed it and we sell it on our website. And then, so that was illustrated by Midjourney, made by Mike. And then I started mucking around with Midjourney myself. And again, this is all still Midjourney beta time. This is before anyone really knew about it. And it was, I got it making these really horrific sort of masks and And it started to present itself as this sort of deep history, prehistoric sort of stuff. And very quickly it ended up in this sort of conversation where I was putting prompts into Midjourney and it was showing me stuff. And then I was sort of talking back to it about what I was seeing and it was showing me more stuff. And I found that really fascinating. I don't use any artist names or anything like that. I'm not trying to make them look like paintings or artwork. It's just, and it seems to be mostly drawing on photographs actually in the stuff that we're using. And it just developed really quickly into this idea where so Doggerland, first of all, we'll break down the name. Mask Witches have forgotten Doggerland. Doggerland is the area that's now the North Sea, but it used to be land before the glaciers melted at the end of the Ice Age, Holocene period. The Earth starts warming up. All this water that's stored in these huge glaciers, allowing Doggerland to be, land. It all melts and Doggerland is flooded and becomes the North Sea. Over a relatively short period of time, actually. There's a lot of debate we will not go into about how quickly it happened and the precise details of Doggerland being flooded. But the actual place is really fascinating. They find, fishermen dredge stuff up. It's called Doggerland because of the Dogger Bank, which you might have heard in the fishing forecast, weather forecast. The Dogger Bank is named after 18th century Dutch ships, doggers, that were cod fishermen. And the Dogger Bank is only like 10, 20 meters deep, the North Sea at that point, because the land underneath is right there. And they would dredge up, caveman tools, basically, and bits of animals with, working on the bone and worked antler. So, gradually it became known that people used to live there. And the mask witches are something that we completely invented, based on the sort of horrible artwork that was coming out of this. I say artwork, I prefer to use the images, actually. The imagery that was coming out of Midjourney. And I like the idea that there were these sort of people that lived there that looked after the community and had to fight evil spirits, that whenever the community of hunter-gatherers falls into disarray or sort of loses its way a bit, or there's disagreement, it unleashes these spirits on the community that only the mask witches can fight. And me being me, Beowulf is really heavily researched. So I've read like everything I can lay my hands on about the Mesolithic period in Doggerland. And it's a sort of idiot psychedelic fantasy, but with really strongly researched roots. So yeah, it's good. But that just happened really quick as a setting. Unlike Beowulf, that came whole cloth, like Conan, into Robert E. Howard's mind. So yeah, no, it's good. Very pleased with it. And we did a little Kickstarter, and I thought it might raise £1,000 maybe, because it's a very strange little project. So we did a little week-long Kickstarter, and it raised 22,000, which was sort of mind-blowing and still is.
Sure. We'll come to Midjourney in a moment, but you blew my mind earlier today with some tweets about sort of some of the research you've done into mask witches, including the idea about when bees first came to our shores, which just totally blew my mind. What do you think are the benefits of writers really diving into their subjects when writing RPGs?
I think something I've realized I'm really interested in is other, and this comes way back from my fine art training. I'm really interested in how other people see things that are from completely different sort of, I'm not really talking about cultures so much, although cultures covers it, but people in very different places to ourselves who see society differently. And if you don't have agriculture, if you're a hunter-gatherer fisher, you don't have enclosures for animals, you don't have those kind of food animals that we're used to, you don't have wool for felt or knitted garments. And it's sort of that stuff that spreads out in these ripples and changes the way you look at things. I've always been fascinated as a sort of political entity. I've always been fascinated by the loss of the commons and the loss of common land that used to be for everyone and has gradually disappeared. Until now, we don't know that. People can't pay their... this is not going to be super political polemic, but, we're all struggling with energy bills. Well, there was a time where the fuel that people use to heat their homes and cook their food could be gathered for free because it was common. I mean, nothing's quite this simple, right? But we don't even have that idea anymore, that you used to be able to collect things and they belong to everyone. What's the Levelers song? It's not by the band The Levelers. It's a Victorian song about the Levelers and the Diggers, rather. I'm very interested in medieval anarchists. Anyway, I'm going off on a read, but that's something that I'm really interested in reading about and understand different viewpoints. Like in Beowulf, one of the big challenges to get players to understand is there's no towns in Beowulf. There are just halls. They're like the centers of power, and it's called a mead hall. We don't really go into this too much in the game. It's all implicit, but the person on the throne in the mead hall is the person who divvies up the drinks. If you're in favor, you get to have the good drinks. You get the good mead, and power is centralized in these individual people. But again, there's no towns. There's no merchant class. There's, things are very different. And I love all that. And I like exploring that. I think role-playing games is a really great way to explore that. And it just involves a lot of reading. And I think I'm a bit that way wired that I really like obsessing about a subject and reading everything about it.
Fair enough. So Mask Watches does use a lot of AI generated art, and it's mostly Midjourney. How do you, as someone who's got a background in fine art and came up as a freelance artist, how do you feel about the rise in AI art, and what do you think the future of it is in tabletop gaming?
It's an interesting thing, this, and it's become a very hot topic, and it's a very sensitive topic, because the first thing to say is I totally understand that a lot of people are very scared for their jobs right now, and I understand why, right? It's a big change. I think there's a few things to balance that out. I mean, the immediate, I would say, I think in response to it is I think we will see an enormous glut of AI-produced imagery. I think that will ultimately provide greater value to handmade imagery, because it is a different thing. If you're working with a human artist, and certain settings really thrive on a very close description. See, Mask Witches was made because the AI is sort of uncontrollable. So it's sort of useless for illustration in a way, because you can't get it to do what you actually want. It gives you what it wants to give you. Now, weirdly, Midjourney is getting more and more and more sophisticated all the time. And so it's becoming, I think, wrongly, better and better. There's going to come a time where I'm not going to be interested in it, because the imagery will be so literal and so in line with the prompts you put in, and people will become so able to make it give predictable results that I will lose all interest in it. I like it when it was absolutely crazy and weird and frightening. Some of the images, like, what is that? Like, we've sort of hooked up a computer to artwork, and like a nightmare. I thought it was going to look like the sort of 80s and be all anodyne, but it's horrific. I'm really inspired by all that. And I love the uncontrollableness of it. But also a really key point I want to get across. I think in a way it's been really spoiled by the way human beings have used it, in that they've used it unethically to try and rip off the styles of artists, which has never occurred to me, perhaps because I can draw and paint. I don't need to rip off. It never engaged me in the slightest putting in artist names. I was already bored. In the beta version, Bakinski's name was put in 10 bazillion times, because the early iterations of Midjourney did really well with that Bakinski style imagery. And for a little while, it was all anyone was doing. And again, that was really boring. It's like, yeah, okay. I understand why when you get your hands on it for the first time, you want to make the pictures like those ones you've seen. And it's quite a thrill because you can do it. And especially if you don't regard yourself as an artist or an image maker, the thrill at the level of work you can produce in the quantity you can produce it is incredible. I think it's very mean to deny that to people, because it is thrilling. But it's been used quite unethically, and this idea that you can just do away with artists and just have the machine do it. There's been a recent thread on Twitter that was really nasty stuff, really like, well, you can all suck it up, you're all going to lose your jobs. The AI feeds off imagery. It needs artists to feed it, or photographers or whatever, image makers.
Sure.
And I think if the Midjourney people are making out like bandits, they would be very, very wise to start setting up some art foundations and investing money in art education. And I think they could do some really interesting things with that. I don't think it should be a machine for just ripping off and replacing artists. That's the most disappointing use I can imagine for it. And I sit in a really weird position, because I do make my living, a good part of my living, from my own artwork. My name is in there, 1,000 times as a prompt, doesn't get anyone anywhere. It's not very good. Like, I just laugh. I don't personally feel slighted or upset by that at all, which again sort of feeds. I'm just not bothered by that. But I know some people who are very upset that their name has been put in, and they can see, because what the machine, Midjourney in particular, what it's doing is it goes and looks at imagery that it finds. I am not fully aware of exactly what the limitations on how it looks at things, what those are. This is a problem. It's very non-transparent, and it's just measuring. It's taking measurements of artwork, but in such complexity that we can't really understand the level at which it's measuring, and can then use those same measurements and models to spit out things that don't look like models. They look like the thing it's measured. I think it's a very interesting time for copyright. I don't think copyright can keep up with that. This is
no,
different.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Someone's going to do that at some point, aren't they? They're going to say, "Hey, this AI sampled my art, and I'm going to sue the makers of that AI."
I mean, I think there's some other possibilities.
Definitely going to happen.
And it will be down to a judge to decide whether it's a rip-off or whether it's like parallel creation. And I mean, the way it's actually working is not using pieces of people's artwork. There's a lot of misunderstanding about this, that it's sort of cutting artwork into chunks and representing it so it's like a derivative work. Under the current setup, it isn't doing that. Now, I mean, another possibility, I think, is someone like Disney or Getty Images, perhaps. The stock photography websites are going berserk at the moment because this could ruin them more than it's going to ruin artists, right? They're more in danger. And I would say to artists that are angry about it, those stock art websites are not your friend. There's a lot of people going, the stock art websites are on our side. They're not. They're on their own side. Same for a lot of artists responded with, AI, you can't own AI artwork. So we're your friend. You should be our friend and hire us because you can buy our rights. And it's like, when did we suddenly just be okay with giving up all our rights to our artwork? This is jumping back. Like, I had some sad times when I realized, leaving Cubicle 7, everything I made was work for hire. There's some stuff I could dispute because of the way the contracts works, but I don't own any of that. None of it's mine. That's not like the better option for artists, right? It's a bit weird. I've seen some weird sort of alliances formed around this, but I think that's all symptomatic of a huge change. What I was going to say, sorry, Ian, I'm really rambling.
That's right.
I think someone like Getty Images or somebody with a lot of money like Disney might well buy Midjourney and switch it off. I mean, this is a possibility.
That's a thought, like buy it to cancel it effectively, buy it to like, make it not happen anymore.
Within their own organization, buy it out. Well, Disney, Marvel, Disney, whatever, that whole conglomerate could just, if they like what it does, they could have it for themselves, right? And I mean, there's various people going, that's open source, what have you. Money solves a lot of those problems.
Money can make that go away.
I think so. So I mean, I'm not saying everything's cool, right? It's horrible the way it's gone. I didn't start using AI in its current format. I mean, do you remember, right, there was another really horrible thing that happened where they opened up the beta and everyone and their dog could get in, which is nice. As I was saying before, it would be a shame to deny people the enjoyment that comes out of image making. But suddenly social media was just absolutely flooded and it was all the same and it was all really empty and it doesn't mean anything. And the time for me on Masqueridges and Silver Road, the time we save on how quickly we can make huge bodies of work and kind of have these conversations with the AI and really push it in all sorts of different ways. We then have to use that time saved to apply meaning to it, so that it becomes a whole project. Like, we're exploring this imagined Doggerland. And that to me means something, and it's art of a different kind. But if you just go, I've made a steampunk Zeppelin, I've made another ghost in a hallway, it goes on and on and on. And you're like, I get your excitement, right? Because I get excited making images, but it's not enough in the end. And I hope that faddish part of it, I think, has largely burned out because everyone just got so sick of it. And it's like, that's step one, But step two is, what does it mean? The intention. I wrote a blog piece about this on Facebook. The intentionality of art is so important. I get a bit vexed because people sort of go, AI can't have that or whatever. No, but a human being using it can apply that to it. I am doing that, So yeah, it's interesting. There might come a point where I'm just bored of it. It's getting too good. It's too good where they're going, oh, we've improved how it can do faces. And you go, have you though? I liked it when they all looked absolutely wild.
Yeah, just absolutely mad faces. Yeah.
Yeah, it was brilliant. And you paired that artwork or that imagery to a project that it suited, and it was all dreamlike and upsetting, and it was brilliant.
Yeah.
But now if it can just pump out like all the faces look like Barbie now, and you're like, oh, is that good? Because they also instituted the users can vote on what images are good. And I was like, no,
oh dear.
Don't democratize that. Like, this is a good. Have you seen the photos of things like where horrible fans take a picture of, say, Aloy from what's that game called?
Horizon.
Horizon Zero Dawn and all that. And she's they've gone quite far down the road and making like this realistic person who looks like she lives outdoors quite a lot. Let's not be foolish. She's still supposed to be attractive and all that kind of thing. But they made her a little bit realistic. And people did these paint overs going, why doesn't she look like this? And they've made her look like a porn model.
I've seen some of those, and it's just astonishingly bad.
Oh no, you need some guidance in your life, young men. This is not okay. I'm sorry that you don't have wholesome role models.
Yeah.
But it's that, and that public voting on things is going to ruin it, because it's not going to be able to do anything interesting. It's going to do things that are popular.
It'll just be homogenized, won't it, eventually?
Yeah. I mean, I feel for, to some degree, I feel for, say, RPG stock artists. I'm old enough to remember a time where we begged artists not to sell stock, that they were basically scabs and that they were kicking the bottom out of the pricing in RPGs. And I'm afraid there was a generation of stock artists who went, no, we don't care. We want to sell our artwork for $2 a piece. And we're nice to publishers for doing it. And you go, okay, we just have to accept that that's happened. And that's a thing now. But I don't think that really killed any art careers. I think this is a little bit different to that. But yeah, it's so funny. The world turns. It's very strange. We all have jobs in RPGs because compositors that used to make metal plates, in printing press, they don't work anymore. My father-in-law was a very highly skilled Finnish-trained compositor. And of course, it went away. Desktop publishing absolutely killed that job. But if it weren't for desktop publishing, I couldn't do my job. So I don't want to be churlish in either direction on that,
Yeah.
This sort of change is pretty horrific. But also, I hate when people go, it's inevitable. No, it's not, because it could be used ethically. It could, the way it looks at things, perhaps needs some examination. I'm very boring because I'm too complicated.
No, that fascinating answer. No, I really want to talk to you about that because, we talked a little bit about Tabletop Scotland about it, and I really want to dive into that with you. So you've recently brought the cult classic A-State back to tables. How did that come Handiwork Games' way, and what was the process like reviving that game?
Like most things, it's Gregor Hutton's fault. We were at Tabletop.
Gregor has a lot to answer for.
Yes, damn him. The previous Tabletop Scotland that was in like 1850 or something before the plague.
And long ago.
Yeah, Gregor was there with a copy of Blades in the Dark and some notes about how Forged in the Dark would really work for A-State. And it was really, really good. And we had a little chat about that. And of course, the worry was that Malcolm might not be interested, because Malcolm had written all these great games and had just had enough of the industry. He'd been pretty poorly treated by some very aggressive fans who just wouldn't leave the guy alone, So he sort of got out, started a different life, really. He's gone into teaching history, and, I'm sure very fine history teacher is as well. And I agreed I would ask, could we do this? And it won't. Will keep you safe almost, it doesn't need to be anything to do with you. And I was absolutely amazed because he agreed, which wasn't really something I anticipated was going to happen. But he did agree. And we just took it from there. And he's been amazingly involved, very much so. And I hope it's rekindled a bit of his passion for his own writing. He's writing a setting for us for Silver Road, which is great as well. So he's doing some original work. And really good. We got Morgan Davey, who is a genius. I think he's one of the best RPG designers working in the indie space at the moment, and one of the loveliest people. And
he's a very nice man. I've met Morgan Davey many moons ago, but yeah, he's a very nice guy. Very nice.
Really,
guy.
I talk to Morgan most days, and he's one of those people who I always come away from the conversations like really enlightened. You know what I mean? He's got a lot of really interesting thoughts on everything. Really great guy. Well, can't say enough nice things about him. But he did all the conversion work. I think it's really helped A-State with the sort of player focus that in the game you play. It's a sort of dystopian sci-fi deal with hugely disparate levels of technology in this enormous sprawling city that you can't leave. And in the game you now play troublemakers who have their corner in the city that you define as a group, and then you try and improve your corner of the city. We've added to Fortune in the Dark. We've added the care action, which is really cool. And funnily enough, a little bit like my D&D thing about, knocking down people's resistance to friendship is almost just the gross version of what you now do in A-State. It's a far more refined and elegant take by Gregor and Morgan Malk, whereas my version is just be nice to orcs till they're your friend. It's nothing like that in A-State, just to be clear. I'm joking. So yeah, it is, it's your Fortune in the Dark sort of play cycle where you improve the quality of life where you live, or you attempt to, and that spawns new troubles, and things constantly cycle round as you try and push back the forces of corruption and nastiness in your corner.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. So I mean, I backed it, and I was very tangentially involved in the original A-State. Did a little bit of writing for it way back when I was much younger, and not a very good writer at all. But yeah, it's a fantastic looking book. Paul Boren's involved as well. Is Paul? Yeah. Paul's a permanent member of Handiwork Games, is he?
Yes, he is. Yeah, he was somebody I'd recruited at Cubicle 7, and he came along a little bit after I started Handiwork Games, and he's one of our full timers. Does layout and graphic design. Yeah, and one of the creators of A-State. So it's nice that came full circle. I think in part that's why it was okay for us to do it. The creators, because one of them is involved. Well, they're both involved really heavily, but I mean, at a company level involved.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic looking book. I love Blades in the Dark. I really like that system. Currently running a Gone, which is another John Harper game, but A-State is high on my want to run list, so that will be next.
Check out the 3 Coins as well, which is the role playing game that they play in the city. So it's a game within a game, and it's really good. That's Morg's game, and it's really, really good. We went back to the basics about how would a role playing game be played in the city, and what if in our culture we like gold and XP, what do they want in the city? What's their sort of fancy reward?
I love that idea.
Yeah, it was good. Really enjoyable. Really easy work as well. It was brilliant because everyone was throwing in these just fantastic ideas, and everyone got it. What it was about. But yeah, very nice. Cool.
So what's in the future for Handiwork Games?
What are we doing? So we're hard at work. Just the other day, I finished up the sort of proper final manuscript for Mask Witches. It was mostly written before the campaign, but you sit down to actually look at the thing and go, oh, there's some connective tissue needed here. So all that was finished up. We're hard at work on that. We do a lot of we do what we call sort of full spectrum production services for other companies. So if you need anything illustrated or laid out, what have you, we have a sort of wing of the company dedicated to that.
Oh, okay.
A lot of that stuff on at the moment. I was going to say, I can just put a little advert on your show about that. I've seen some horrible 3D mock-ups doing the round of books where the pages don't align properly with the 3D model. I've got a really good setup for doing that. If anyone ever wants book mock-ups, box mock-ups, talk to me. It doesn't have to be expensive at all, and I can do you nice ones, not these hideous. The contents of the page sort of drift off. Makes me mad.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it's rubbish. Why are they doing that? Anyway, sorry. I get all annoyed. And that's me. That's the real me, where I'm like, things aren't being done properly. That's very upsetting to me. Anyway, so yeah, we've got a lot of work on there. There's a whole bunch of projects. We recently finished up Paul Mitchener's Out of the Ashes. That was a very long-standing project. We were working with Paul, which was brilliant. And that's all finished up. That's printing now. We did all the art and layout for that. In terms of our own stuff, we're working on Beowulf the King, which is like high-level play for Beowulf, where rather than controlling a little band of followers, you're controlling whole kingdoms. And basically like the later part of the Beowulf poem.
Cool.
He's old and a king. So that's really good. Jacob's taking the lead on writing that. That's really, really good. What else have we got coming up? I feel like I'm really forgetting something really massively important that we're working on. But Mask Witches has totally dominated my time. We're finishing off the A-State Kickstarter and Twin Seas for Beowulf, which is an adventure collection. They're both fulfilling at the same time, which is just eating my head at the moment. It's very difficult fulfilling two at the same time. But I want to get them both out the door, They're both. We've got both books printed. America being round this planet is quite hard. This whole round planet seas situation, very awkward, and I wish it wasn't the way it is. But so that's logistics is eating up a lot of my time. And we've got a few things on the go, on the quiet, that we shall see how they pan out before we say any more. We've got millions. We haven't talked about Forest Dragon at all, which is fine. But I've got 2 Forest Dragon games done and ready to go, which at some point I need to shove out into the light. Because, really cool. But yeah, it's all
fantastic.
Yeah,
it sounds like it. Where can our listeners find you online then, John?
So no one says that anymore. www.handiwork.games is our website, and you can find everything else from there. We got a shop there. You can find us on Twitter @GamesHandiwork. We're on Facebook, all the usual places, Instagram. Check out our website. There's all sorts of information about all our games on there, and it'd be lovely to see you.
Thank you so much for coming along tonight, John. Thank you. Very nice to talk to you tonight about all things RPGs. And we will be back in another couple of months with another on stage. So do come along to our Discord and listen in. You can find all our bits and pieces at giantbrain.co.uk. Thank you very much for listening. For now, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.